When I was born, I wasn't born right. I don't think I've ever been right, normal, the way other people are. I think there's something wrong with my head and my brain, something that doesn't quite connect, something that doesn't really click, that just doesn't go. I've never really known what that was, what I was missing, what kept me from being what other people thought was normal, but all I know is that I've never had it. I've never been what I should have been, or what other people thought I should have been, as it were. Even as a little girl with my family, I wasn't right. I wasn't what I was supposed to be. I wasn't what they wanted me to be. It's hard to explain. It's hard to think back on, too. My father was not a very kind man. He more so tormented me than tried to raise me. The only time he actually paid attention to me was when he could mock me or make fun of me or scare me or yell at me for something. If he had a bad day at work, I was one of his favorite punching bags. Not physically. It didn't always get physical. There were times, but it wasn't always physical. There were words. There were just words condemning me for being what I am, for not being smart enough, for not being alert enough, for just not being right. I didn't understand what right was supposed to be, what normal they wanted me to be. I didn't understand. Something just couldn't click with it. My brain just couldn't wrap my head around it. My mother wasn't as bad as my father was. She wasn't as abusive. She had her moments when she was angry, when she hit me, when she was annoyed, she didn't want to hear me talk. But I think that was because my father hurt her too, that she was that way towards me. Like they say, crap flows downward, right? But that wasn't the part that I resent her for. That wasn't the part that hurt me the most. Not when it was coming from her. The part that made me feel as if I wasn't the daughter she wanted was the fact that she always compared me to other people, to other little girls. She would always say how my cousins can do this or that for themselves, how they were able to take care of themselves, clean up after themselves. I was only a little girl at the time, so understandable how she would gripe about things like that. But the thing was, she never taught me how to do those things for myself. She never taught me how to do my own hair. She never taught me how to clean up. She never really taught me how to do any of that. She just expected me to know, but I didn't. I didn't know. I didn't understand why I was wrong. I didn't understand why I wasn't the daughter they wanted me to be. It was crushing at that young age. Feeling like I was wrong. Feeling like everything I did was scrutinized and just mocked, and going day after day feeling like anything I could do would just cause more humiliation to be thrusted upon me. But as I got older, I started to care less and less. Their words seemed to fade more into the background. Nothing about what they did had changed. I had changed. I became hollow. I felt like I was becoming more and more disconnected with the world. It felt like everything was just fading to gray, to some kind of monotone. It felt like nothing mattered. I went days without really saying or doing anything. I was kind of like a robot. I got up, I went to school, I came home, did my homework, waited for dinner, and just hid out in my room until it was time to go to bed. Of course, they complained about that too. Why don't you ever go out and hang out with your friends? I wasn't really allowed to go anywhere though. Why don't you try to look prettier when you go to school? But I wasn't allowed to wear makeup or really dress up nicely. They always had something to complain about. No matter what I did, no matter what I tried to do, in their eyes, I was never right. In their eyes, I was never normal. In their eyes, I wasn't the daughter they wanted. And I eventually reached the point where I stopped caring. Where something in my brain just became more and more twisted and malicious and deep-seated. There became just resentment towards them, towards humanity. Hatred just brewed inside me, especially when I saw happy people. I was upset because I couldn't be like that. I wasn't allowed to be like that. Because when I was happy, I was still wrong. I was always wrong. And it was such an empty feeling. Eventually, I left them all behind. I cut ties with my family, and I haven't heard from them since. I don't miss them, but what they did to me, what they instilled in me, it never really went away. I kind of floated through life, just sort of waiting for it to be over. It might be pathetic to hear, but I was somewhat of a religious person. Not really in the sort of organized religious sense, but I was the type that believed that suicide could potentially send me to hell. And as awful as this place was, I didn't really feel like damning myself for eternity. But I wasn't really alive either. I wasn't really living. I was just there. I just existed. And I just sort of waited for it all to be over. As pathetic as that might seem. But one day, all that changed. I met someone special. Well, they might not have realized how special they were to me at the time, but they were. They were so kind to me without even realizing it. They treated me like I was a person, like I was normal, like nothing was wrong with me. I never really experienced that before. I never really gave anyone else a chance to do that before. But they did it so naturally. It was hard to believe. For the first time in so long, I'd actually cried. It was a really pathetic first meeting because I started crying, but it was a good feeling. It felt right. I didn't have to worry about being normal or weird or whatever my family thought I was, whatever other people thought I was. In their eyes, I was okay as I was. And it was such a nice feeling. It's odd to say that. Well, maybe it's not odd to say this, but I fell in love with them in that moment because they accepted me as I was. But I understood that that wasn't normal. That wasn't what normal people do. My brain still wasn't right. It was still twisted. It was still wrong. But in that moment, I didn't care. In that moment, I had met the love of my life, even if they didn't know it yet. And I wanted to have them for myself. As terrible and as wonderful as a thought that was, I had to have them. I had to protect them from how cruel the world could be. I had to keep them safe. I didn't want them to suffer what I had gone through. I didn't want them to be sad like I was. I didn't want them to hate life like I did. It was fine if they hated me. It was fine if they resented me for what I wanted to do, for what I was going to do. As long as they were safe, as long as they were okay. In the end, that's all that mattered to me.